Hidden Object Guru here with more reviews of games I've recently sampled. As always, these are going to be rated out of 10 based on how interested I am in playing more of them. First up, we have Green Hell VR. I've played the entire game Green Hell in flat mode, so I'm able to be confident in saying that this is the best version of Green Hell that exists. Being able to freely look around the expansive jungle makes navigation a breeze. The motion control interactions, while not strictly realistic, work perfectly well, and inventory management is far better here than it ever was in the original game. I ran into one bug where after leaving the tutorial the game stopped offering prompts or letting me interact with things, but quitting and reloading sorted that out immediately. I'd recommend against playing this on permadeath mode while these kinds of bugs are in there, but beyond that, this is another point in favor of my long-standing belief that every first-person game is just better in VR. 8 out of 10. Starless. I've often talked about my passion for games that shamelessly recreate the mechanics of other games I enjoy. This time it's a Professor Lupo and his horrible pets clone. The game is set on an interplanetary ark full of colonists. An infection has transformed huge segments of the crew into vicious, long-clawed beasts, and the player controls a series of colonists who are woken up and tasked with repairing the ship's various systems. Just like Professor Lupo had players controlling a new clone every time they were devoured by an enemy, in Starless, a new settler is woken up every time the last one is slaughtered. Unfortunately, there's a slight problem with enemy design, where Professor Lupo's creatures operated under very strict, predictable rules of behavior. The monsters in Starless kind of wander wherever they feel like, making them extremely frustrating to avoid. The player is provided with an emergency teleporter to help them escape from tight situations. Still, the element of randomness that it adds is deeply unsatisfying. 5 out of 10. Tower Princess. Speaking of games where they just scratch off the serial numbers and call it something else, Tower Princess, the Maximo clone whose demo I covered earlier this year, is finally out! It's even better now than it was then. The developers have rebalanced the difficulty quite expertly, which keeps the action going far more smoothly than it did in the demo. The new characters, enemies, and bosses are all extremely well designed, and I'm excited to see if I can get all the way through it. This is 3D, Rogue Legacy, and it's just fantastic. 8 out of 10. Cuties Hacked. I wondered just how long it was after the invention of the kicks genre that they first decided that the image revealed as the player cleared the level should be a naked woman. 5 minutes? 6? I wouldn't be shocked to discover that I'm actually wrong about this, and Kicks was an American version of a pornographic Japanese game with the nudity removed. In any event, Cuties Hacked is an extremely good Kicks-like, with delightfully complicated rules and cleverly constructed levels. Enemies in this game are almost impossible to destroy, so the gameplay is about carefully sectioning them off so that they won't interrupt the player's attempts to uncover the rest of the map. It's a great example of the genre, and if you're not psyched about the porn, images featuring uncensored nudity have to be installed separately as DLC. 7 out of 10. Panty Demons. Bizarre and silly even by anime comedy standards, this game asks players to match long strings of matching panties to defeat a nefarious set of self-aware underwear bent on draining life energy from a series of pretty girls. Somehow, this is not an NSFW game. I know, right? While the gameplay is perfectly acceptable, and the story I saw was charmingly absurd, rather quickly I ran into levels that seemed far too difficult to be showing up so early in the game. And then I noticed that the game offered in-app purchases to help the player quickly power up. Which would be fine if this was a free-to-play game, but it's not, which discouraged me from plowing further into the story. Why get invested if I was going to hit a wall that would cost me money to tear down? 4 out of 10. Zombie Soup. I'm always partial to mouse-look and twin-stick shooters, and if my hands hadn't been turned into crippled claws by Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, I think I would very much enjoy playing more of this one. A light-hearted zombie shooter, Zombie Soup does some interesting things with camera angles, shifting from a slightly canted top-down to nearly side view when the situation demands it. The mouse control keeps things entirely playable no matter how weird the camera work gets, but the sheer number of hit points that every zombie has made clicking through the hordes something of a chore. This is kind of a weird situation, because if the game let me hold down the mouse button to shoot quickly and continuously instead of having to click over and over again, I'd probably be scoring the game 2 points higher than I am. 6 out of 10. Agent X. a buggy, awkward, and extremely brief first-person shooter. The best thing I can say about Agent X is that its second level is built using some of the same assets as my beloved Crisis Brigade. It's buggy as heck. My weapons model frequently disappeared. It kept shooting though, which is nice. There's virtually no AI to speak of. The enemies, all women dressed in lingerie and masks, don't activate until the player actually shoots them, meaning they can be picked off with little to no effort. There's just 5 levels, which can be beaten in a minute to 90 seconds each. So due to the strange system of scoring that I use for these reviews, I actually have to give this an I beat it out of 10, which is my 10 out of 10. It's not good though. Incision. A boomer shooter that absolutely drips Quake vibes, Incision gets its gameplay perfectly right. Rushing players from one combat arena to the next, constantly throwing one disgusting enemy after another right into their gun sights, giving them ample opportunity to cause fleshy explosions. The level design is a standout feature, with none of the baffling labyrinths that too often made playing games like this a chore. Every garbage-strewn hallway was alienating and strange, sure, but I was never confused about where I was or what I was supposed to be doing. The game is also impressively clear in its focus. So many Quake inheritors try to mix things up with inventory systems, upgrades, and other RPG-like elements. Incision is focused simply on the moment-to-moment bloody thrills, and it works all the better for it. It's in early access now, but I'm very excited at the prospect of checking out the full game. 7 out of 10. A Last Will and Testament. Certainly an eerie game, and one with a great sense of atmosphere, but it's sabotaged, as so many of these games are, by the lack of a hint system. It's a classic premise. The player has a mansion left to them by someone, but they can only get their inheritance if they manage to find the will somewhere hidden inside its walls. This leads to a bunch of exploration and some light puzzle solving. The developer has even put in some nice Eternal Darkness-style mind games, putting up a blue screen of death and referring to the player by their Steam name from time to time. Sadly, just 10 minutes into the game I found myself stuck. I'd completed a sliding block puzzle, been given a code to open a keypad, but I had no idea where that keypad was located. I had access to 3 doors, all locked, and no keys, so I spent 10 minutes revisiting the areas I had access to, hoping to find one of the keys or a secret room I'd missed. After that, I decided to call it a day. Add in a hint system and I could see myself finishing this intriguing little gem, but as it stands today, why would I go back? 3 out of 10. Timor Redo. I feel like PT, itself an expansion of the brilliant apartment sequence in Silent Hill 4, The Room, has wound up sending a lot of developers down a bad path. Every year I play 20 or more horror games that, at their core, are about walking down a hallway, finding a dead end, and then turning around and seeing that the place I'd come from has changed slightly. It's a reliably creepy premise, constantly having things jump up behind the player, but if it's not done exceptionally well, it gets annoying fast. Timor Redo isn't exactly a shining example of the genre. At its core, there's an interesting nested meta-narrative. A man's nightmare turns out to be a game a woman is playing, turns out to be a movie a man is watching. But the actual gameplay, which boils down to wandering around in way too dark rooms, hoping I stumble onto the random space that triggers a world change, quickly grew tedious. Doing this right requires an incredibly deft touch, constructing a world that naturally leads players through the story, one creepy step at a time. How difficult is it? Even the most popular example of the genre, the aforementioned PT, is pretty much garbage, with puzzles so oblique that the percentage of people to have completed it is essentially a rounding error above 0. And Timor 0 is no PT. 3 out of 10. Moss 2, the Quest 2 version. Obviously Moss 2 is a perfect 10 out of 10 experience on the PSVR. But how does it play on the Quest 2? Pretty fantastically, actually. The only meaningful change is to the control scheme. Where the PSVR had a button mapped for dodging, the Quest controller, which has just 2 face buttons on each hand, requires the player to hit jump and slash at the same time if they want to dodge. This minor convenience is completely overshadowed by how great it is to be able to reach out and grab items rather than simply having to point at them. Also, you can pet Quill, a feature which justifies purchasing the game all on its own. I'm going to play this all the way through again, which means it gets a 9 out of 10. I've been the Hidden Object Guru, thanks for watching. I'll see you back here when we've played some more games, but until then I'm going to say that's right, au revoir.